Ladies and gentlemen, Suji reaction. This is England South Sea bubble. The bubble pops. Actually, part 4. Yeah, the bubble's gonna pop in this one, huh? So I guess so far we've seen how Blunt has created this company, South Sea Company, and he just inflated price of it. Basically a scam, right? I mean, it just gives this kind of a bad image that it's just it's really worth something. Everybody's just buying stocks, so its price is constantly going up because of that. Right, but one day people are going to realize, I guess that day is here, right, that it doesn't have much of value, right, and as suddenly everything will crash. That is a massive scam, and I guess there's some guy named Walpole too, which he had, I guess, arrested, which also bought some debt here and there, which is gonna figure out in this one somehow. So yeah, it's gonna be fun. Even the king is invested in this company, and lots of politicians as well. So I don't know what blowback is going to be there, but yeah, it's gonna be fun. So let's watch it.
Last we left off, South Sea shares were at an all-time high, but under the surface, things were amiss. The company had burned through much of the money it made selling stock by giving people ridiculous terms on shares and offering loans to anybody wanting to buy into South Sea. Legislating its rivals out of business had caused bankrupt business owners to sell South Sea shares to cover their debt, and to cap it all off, the company still hadn't made a single cent selling goods in the South Sea. As August came to a close, these cracks had started to show. The company had ceased its meteoric rise, and in fact was starting to go south.
Yeah, I mean, let's not sugarcoat it with all the technical talk. Like, it hasn't done any profit from the selling goods. It hasn't actually done anything. That's what it means. And all the value that it has is just basically got inflated by a scam that Blunt put out. That's what it is, right? I mean, with this kind of stock and this kind of a system that is created, is beneficial to economy and could benefit people and companies short term, right? If you are planning to make it back in the future. But if you don't do it, it just inflated. That's in the end just basically a scam. That's what this is. So it hasn't done any work, right? And it has £800 a stock price. That is way higher than it originally had. Holy shit.
And Blunt knew that if the shares began to fall, people would start to take a closer look at South Sea House and realize just how bad a shape it was in. So Blunt did the only thing Blunt could do: sell more shares at an even higher price. This was Blunt at his bluntiest. He opened up a new round of stock for purchase at the impossible price of £1,000 a share, while at the same time quietly beginning to sell off what stock he owned in his own company. He pushed that fresh batch of stocks hard, though. This time he offered even more ridiculous incentives, asking for only 10% up front and no payments for a year. I mean, at this point, that sounds more like a late-night TV ad than a stock sale. But lucky for Blunt, the hype around the South Sea Company was still so strong that he was able to sell all of the new stock, bringing in about £1 million more. This was the last time, though, as Blunt sold these absurdly expensive shares.
So basically, he's just selling the stock at £100 and showing that he's selling at £1,000, but some kind of a scheme. They only pay 10% now, then you pay a year later or whatever shit that is. Knowing fully well that people are not going to do that. People basically sell way before that. So he's basically selling the stock at £100 while showing off to the world like he's selling for the £1,000 to inflate. Again, that's just scam.
He had to know that anybody buying in was bound to lose their shirt. The South Sea cash reserves were just too low, and the stock price too high for them to conceivably continue to inflate the share value. He had pushed this monster as far as it could go. And ironically, the bump in share price that Blunt created with this new inflated round of stock was just what some of the earlier investors were looking for in order to get out. As those who had invested early and taken advantage of the 20% down deal had the rest of their payment come due, many found it to be a good time to walk away rather than reinvest their profits back into the company. One such investor was Robert Walpole.
Damn.
You remember him? The great opponent of the South Sea Company? The man Blunt got locked up way back when they were first forming South Sea? Well, despite the whole getting locked in the Tower of London incident, he'd been making a tidy profit off of South Sea stock this whole time, and was in fact planning to reinvest when his friend and personal financial manager, Robert Jacomb, interceded and stopped him from putting money back into South Sea. This not only saved Walpole his personal fortune, but, as we will see next week, cemented his reputation in days to come.
Yeah, and also he also has government debt, right? Because when South Sea Company was buying all the government debt, he also bought some of it.
Come. As South Sea stock inevitably began to droop again, Blunt, having no cash left in the reserves to prop up the share price, tried one last desperate gamble. He offered a dividend of 30% on the stock, with the dividend moving up to 50% for the next 10 years. This was meant to be an offer too attractive to pass up, but instead, it just made all of those investors who were still dreaming the South Sea dream snap awake.
Yeah.
Just to cover this dividend, the company would have to make roughly £15 million a year, or roughly a quarter of the gross domestic product of Great Britain. At long last, the British population thought to themselves, that seems a little unrealistic.
Yeah.
With confidence in the company vanishing,
now it feels unrealistic. Not that, oh, holy shit, it's 800 pounds of stock. What the fuck are they doing? What kind of a business are they doing that it worth that much? But now it's like, okay, that's a quarter of all the goods. I don't think so, man. Damn. How didn't, I guess he was just blinded. Blunt was just blinded with all the money. Otherwise, how didn't he see that, okay, one day this will blow up? There is no way in hell I can just basically keep this up. There's no way the stock is just gonna rise and rise. It's impossible. And he's giving all these schemes out in open. So it's not like something he's doing to back low. Basically, he's doing that in open. So all the investor basically would see like, okay, he's asking just for 10% and for a year no price. Then he creates another scheme about, okay, he's gonna raise the dividend for this percent. What is it doing? I guess, people would realize like, okay, this feels a bit scam type rather than actual real thing.
With nothing left in its coffers, the stock began to plummet. It fell hundreds of pounds a week, and by the middle of September was barely over £150 a share. This down from Blunt's £1,000 share sale just from 3 weeks earlier. Anybody who had invested late, and especially anybody who'd taken out loans to do so, was ruined. Bankruptcies were rampant, and suicides only slightly less so.
Whoa.
Soon, even the old Hollow Sword Blade Company closed up shop, with nothing more than a nice note on the door saying they would certainly cover any of their existing obligations, so just please check back later. Unfortunately, no one informed the king, who was on holiday in his native Hanover. So as the South Sea Company fell apart, so did the royal finances. Which leads us nicely to the final chapter of this tale, the fallout. Do you remember how Walpole had originally tried to convince the government to lock the shares the South Sea could swap for debt to a fixed value? And remember earlier how his friend Jacob had made him divest himself of all of his stock before the collapse? Well, Walpole saw an opportunity in this. He presented himself as the righteous defender of the public against the madness of markets, attempting to seize this chance to get the public on his side, and to finally get even with those who had locked him up so many years ago. But Walpole was a man of wheels within wheels, and beneath this new public persona, and only slightly veiled chance for revenge, he was secretly playing at a much greater opportunity, a chance to take over the government.
I mean, yeah. When you have entire government and even the monarchy basically in the South Sea Company, when you realize South Sea Company is collapsing, that is a massive opportunity where people like this can definitely take advantage, right? Because the entire government and monarchy is at disadvantage right now. They're in vulnerable position. And as far as king and the government, all the basic politician, I like to say Blunt is an asshole and he basically ruined people, which he definitely did. But the politician and the king should have known better. They are in that position for a reason, right? There is no excuse for that. If if a king and his basically all the coffers and money gets ruined because of this, it's his fucking fault. He should have known this coming, right? Invest everything in one company and stock rising at this level. He should have investigated, like, is company actually making the profit, right? When he was part of the company for part time, right? His son or something was part of that. They didn't investigate, like, okay, show me what you're actually doing, what tradings are actually happening, how many ships are going. No politician tried to investigate it. Like, okay, I just want to check just for security purposes, like how many ships are going in and out, how much trading you're actually doing. Nobody checked that. Everybody just cared about the paper that they had. Like, okay, look at the stock prices now. So this is their fault. I can't fault the average public because it's not their job to check all this thing out. It's the government and king's job to check all this shit out, especially when they had a stake in it.
It would be a dicey game because he'd have to make it look like he was helping his fellow Whigs, while at the same time making sure that the current leaders of the Whig party got caught in the blast radius from the South Sea scandal. He would also need to save the king from the fallout, because he would need the king's favor if he was going to take over.
Yeah.
Besides, if the king went down with the South Sea Company, the Whigs might lose everything, and that wouldn't fit Walpole's plans at all. Luckily for him, the Whig leadership had only one real plan.
And not just that, king is basically the figurehead of the entire country. If he goes down, any plan you're doing for the future, any kind of prosperous plan you have about the future might fall apart too. So you have to save the king in the end, right? If you want the economy to be stable in the future.
To have the Bank of England bail out their hated rival, South Sea. And even more luckily, he still had friends in the Bank of England from back when he first tried to have the government give the debt to the bank instead of South Sea. Walpole negotiated a much better deal with the bank than the rest of the leadership could, convincing them and the East India Company to offer to swap their stock for the now nearly worthless South Sea stock people were stuck with. He also got all outstanding debt that people owed the South Sea Company for buying stock on credit cancelled, which made him a public hero. Many people still lost their shirts, but at least now they wouldn't lose their whole wardrobe.
Yeah.
The British public was still in a fervor, though, and a parliamentary inquiry was demanded. This complicated Walpole's plans somewhat. On the one hand, he needed to appear to be all for rooting out the insidious corruption that had ruined so many. On the other hand, if anybody started looking closely at what had really gone on, the Whigs, the king, even perhaps Walpole himself would soon be implicated. This juggling act was about to get complicated, and it was all about to come to a head around a man named Robert Knight. And
Walpole would get implicated, sure, because he was in the middle of all these things, but he wasn't the one at fault, right? I guess that wouldn't matter when, when the shit goes down, basically. But yeah, king and politician, all those, just because they saw the dollar signs or pound signs, because this is England, I guess, in their eyes, and they just didn't check anything, is their fucking fault. And for that, lots of people hanged themselves, killed themselves because of this shit.
And his little green ledger. Join us next week for the conclusion of the South Sea Bubble, as we dive into the fallout from the collapse of the South Sea Company, find out the ultimate fate of all our actors, and learn the wild tale of the small green book that had the power to take down the most powerful government in the world.
Collapse? It never stood for it to collapse. It was bullshit from the start. Damn, this is just effed up, man. This whole thing is effed up. I mean, I knew this, but still, watching this video is kind of pissing me off. Lots of people died. Every time, commoners are the one who gets the, really... How many people died because of this? They killed themselves because of this. Of course they did. They invested all their money, like 600, 700 pounds of stock into the company, and the stock fell to 100, 150 pounds, and it's just keep gonna fall from there. Damn, that was just fucked up at the time. Right, people, that was England South Sea Bubble. The bubble pops with the 10 extra credits. I hope those politicians and even the king basically suffer some kind of a, some kind of a justice, I guess. I don't know. And Blunt definitely, because he's the one asshole, right? I mean, he was really a genius for figuring all this shit out. But he wasn't genius enough to think that, okay, one day this will, blow up. Or maybe he just thought that, okay, when the time comes, I'll think of something or something like that. I hope all of them get some kind of a, justice from this, right? Get some kind of a, I guess, punishment. Alright, people, if you like my Rickson, like, subscribe, check out the Rickson, there's a link in the description. Check out the cost of this, then cards, and yeah, I'll see you next time.